There is a ghost in the memory of the human race. A phantom limb. We feel its absence, even if we do not know its name. It is the lingering suspicion that we are a civilization with amnesia, that we were once greater, once wiser, and that the knowledge we fight so hard to acquire today is not being discovered, but rediscovered. It is a haunting sense that beneath the polished surface of our modernity, beneath the gleaming skyscrapers and humming servers, lies a vast cavern of forgotten wisdom, echoing silently in the dark. This spectral void whispers that the march of progress is not a clean, uninterrupted ascent, but a tangled labyrinth of gains and losses, of light snuffed out and then rekindled. It is the shadow of a colossal intellect lost to time, a monument to what humanity once dreamed and nearly achieved. We believe our history is a straight line, an arrow of progress, shot from a primitive, superstitious past, flying true towards our own, brilliant, technological present. We see ourselves as the pinnacle, the first to build computers, the first to map the heavens, the first to understand the complex clockwork of the cosmos. Our textbooks map a neat trajectory, from darkness into light, from ignorance to knowledge, with no detours, no regressions. We tell ourselves stories of firsts: the first airplane, the first microscope, the first quantum breakthrough. We stand on the shoulders of giants, we say. But what if some of those giants were taller, broader, more luminous than we realize? What if their shoulders were higher than ours because their knowledge was deeper, their vision clearer? What if the arrow we see was not an arrow at all, but a spiral, a coil of forgotten brilliance? We are wrong. There was a place, 2,000 years ago, that defies this comforting story. A place where the line of history bent, where the future happened too soon. It was not a city, but a building. It was not a kingdom, but an idea, a single structure, on the shores of the Mediterranean, that was said to contain the entire, collective mind of the ancient world. All the philosophy, all the history, all the science, all the poetry, every thought, every dream, every discovery of humanity, gathered under one roof. A temple to human curiosity, a sanctuary where the restless spirit of inquiry found a home. Here, scholars from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond mingled, debated, and dreamed. It was a beacon that shone across continents, drawing seekers of wisdom like moths to a flame. This was no mere library, it was the crucible of civilization. They called it the Great Library of Alexandria. And then, it was gone. It was not just a building that was lost. It was not just a collection of scrolls that was burned. It was, we are told, the knowledge of the gods. The blueprints for a different future, a future of steam engines in ancient Rome, of heliocentric models 1,800 years before Copernicus, of anatomical knowledge that would not be seen again until the Renaissance. Imagine a world where Archimedes' principles powered machines centuries earlier, where Aristarchus' sun-centered cosmos altered the course of astronomy long before Europe's dark ages. Consider the medical treatises that detailed the human body with precision lost for centuries. The philosophical dialogues that grappled with ethics and metaphysics in ways that still resonate. This was a library not just of books, but of possibility, an archive of potential futures that could have reshaped the very fabric of human progress. The story of the Library of Alexandria is not the story of a fire. It is the story of a murder. A slow, brutal, agonizing murder, with 100 different culprits, over 700 years. It is the story of how humanity lost its mind, and it is a warning. A warning that knowledge is not permanent. That what is gathered can be scattered, and what is known can be, forever, lost. The destruction was not a single blaze, but a series of blows, wars, political shifts, religious zealotry, neglect, and time itself, all conspiring to erode this bastion of enlightenment. It was the unraveling of a tapestry woven with the threads of countless civilizations, each lost thread a tragedy not just for Alexandria, but for all mankind. The slow suffocation of a light that once illuminated the ancient world, a cautionary tale about the fragility of human memory and the price of intellectual complacency. Our story begins not with a library, but with a god king. Alexander the Great. In 332 BC, Alexander, in his whirlwind conquest of the known world, marched into Egypt. He was 24 years old. He was not just a conqueror. He was a visionary, a student of Aristotle. He didn't just want to rule the world. He wanted to unify it, to create a single, global culture, a fusion of Greek reason and Eastern mysticism. His ambitions stretched beyond mere dominion. He sought to forge a new civilization, one that harmonized the wisdom of East and West, blending the rational with the mystical, the philosophical with the practical. Alexander saw himself as a bridge between worlds, a harbinger of a unified human spirit transcending tribalism and parochialism. He needed a new capital for this new world. He found it on the coast of Egypt, a small fishing village called Rhodotis. Here, between a lake and the sea, he laid out the plans for the greatest city the world had ever seen, a city that would bear his name. Alexandria. The location was no accident. A natural harbor, protected by the Mediterranean's gentle embrace, it offered a strategic crossroads of trade routes, cultures, and ideas. It was a blank canvas upon which Alexander's vision of a cosmopolitan metropolis could be painted, a city designed not just for administration, but for intellectual and cultural flourishing. Alexander would not live to see it built. He died, mysteriously, in Babylon, his empire shattering before it was even born. His sudden death at the age of 32 sent ripples of uncertainty and ambition across his vast territories. Without his guiding hand, the carefully woven threads of his empire began to unravel, each general eyeing the pieces to claim as their own. The dream of a unified world under one ruler faded into factional struggles and civil wars. His generals, the Diadochi, tore his world apart. They were wolves, fighting over the body of the lion. And the most cunning of them all, the jackal, was a man named Ptolemy Soter. Ptolemy was a soldier, a bodyguard, and perhaps Alexander's own half-brother. He was a man of brutal pragmatism. He did not try to win the whole empire. He aimed for the richest, most defensible prize. He hijacked Alexander's funeral procession, stole his body, and brought it to Egypt. He declared himself pharaoh. This act was more than political theater. It was a statement of intent, a claim to legitimacy rooted in both Greek and Egyptian traditions. By presenting himself as pharaoh, Ptolemy sought to anchor his rule in the ancient lineage of Egyptian kingship, thus bridging conqueror and conquered. But Ptolemy knew that military might was not enough. His dynasty was Greek, ruling over an ancient Egyptian populace. He was a foreigner, a usurper. He needed more than power. He needed legitimacy. He needed to prove that Alexandria was not just a new capital, but the only capital. That it was the intellectual and cultural center of the entire world. That it was the new Athens. In doing so, Ptolemy was not merely seeking to consolidate his rule. He was planting the seeds for an intellectual revolution. For the city to endure, it had to shine not only with political authority but with the radiant glow of knowledge and culture. He found his answer in an exiled Athenian politician named Demetrius of Phalerum. Demetrius, a student from Aristotle's own school, gave Ptolemy a breathtakingly simple idea. Athens, he said, had its academy. But a king does not build a school, a king builds a temple. This was a profound distinction. Schools could be places of learning, but temples were sacred. They were eternal. They commanded reverence. By framing the pursuit of knowledge as a sacred act, Demetrius elevated the project from mundane scholarship to divine mission, a temple, not to a god, but to the Muses. The 9 goddesses of art, poetry, and science. A Mauseon. This was the stroke of genius. The Mauseon would not be just a library. It would be the world's first, state-funded, universal research institute. A think tank, a university, a zoo, a medical school, and a library. All rolled into one. It was a place where poets composed verses, astronomers charted the stars, mathematicians wrestled with geometry, and physicians dissected the mysteries of the human body. It was a crucible of interdisciplinary collaboration, a hive where knowledge was not compartmentalized but interconnected. The Mauseon embodied the Renaissance spirit centuries before the Renaissance, a testament to the boundless curiosity and ambition of the human mind. Within its walls, scholars were provided with the unprecedented luxury of time and resources to pursue pure inquiry. Patronized by the Ptolemaic rulers, They were freed from the immediate demands of survival or politics, able to devote themselves wholly to understanding the universe and humanity's place within it. The Mauseon was a sanctuary where reason reigned supreme, where the boundaries of thought were pushed into unexplored territories. The Great Library, often conflated with the Mauseon, was its beating heart, a repository of scrolls and manuscripts from the farthest reaches of the ancient world. Ships arriving at Alexandria's bustling harbor were searched for texts, which were copied and archived. The ambition was staggering: to collect every book in existence, to preserve every written word, to map the vast intellectual landscape of humankind. From the epic poetry of Homer to the philosophical treatises of Plato, from Egyptian papyri to Babylonian star charts, the library was a living mosaic of human achievement. Its shelves were said to contain hundreds of thousands of scrolls, fragile yet potent vessels of knowledge. The librarians were not mere custodians. They were scholars and editors, critiquing, summarizing, and synthesizing texts. They sought to reconcile contradictions, to create unified corpuses of knowledge, and to push the boundaries of understanding. The Mauseon and the library together represented the pinnacle of Hellenistic intellectual life. They were a beacon of enlightenment during an era otherwise marked by political turmoil and cultural fragmentation. Here, the ancient world dreamed of immortality, not through conquest or monuments, but through the preservation and expansion of knowledge. Yet, as brilliant as this institution was, it was vulnerable. The tides of history, with their ceaseless churn, would not spare even this temple of wisdom. The loss of the library is a tragedy writ large, a symbol of how fragile the flame of knowledge truly is. But even in its destruction, it reminds us that the quest for understanding is eternal, that the human spirit, though it may falter, will always seek to remember, to rediscover, to rebuild. Thus, the Great Library of Alexandria stands not only as a monument to what was lost, but as a clarion call to what remains to be found, a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and the unbreakable bond between knowledge and survival. But to grasp the magnitude of what Alexandria represented, we must delve deeper into the world that birthed it, a world teetering on the cusp of myth and history, where gods walked among men, and the very act of questioning was a revolutionary act. The Mediterranean basin, cradled by Egypt, Greece, Asia Minor, and the Near East, was a cauldron of civilizations, each with its own stories, its own traditions, its own languages. Yet, despite differences, they all shared one thing: the insatiable desire to understand the cosmos, the origins of life, and the meaning of existence. Alexandria was the living embodiment of this convergence, a melting pot where papyrus scrolls from the Nile met inscribed clay tablets from Mesopotamia, where Greek theaters echoed with the recitations of Homer even as Egyptian priests preserved ancient lore on temple walls. Here, intellectual borders blurred and bled into one another. It was a place where the boundaries between science, philosophy, religion, and art dissolved in a shared pursuit of truth. The Ptolemies, successors to Alexander, understood this profound potential. Their reign, lasting nearly 3 centuries, was characterized not merely by territorial control but by a commitment to cultural grandeur. They recruited the brightest minds across the Hellenistic world, from the rugged shores of Ionia to the deserts of Persia, offering patronage that was unparalleled. Scholars were courted with land, stipends, and the promise of eternal fame through their work. Alexandria did not merely collect texts. It cultivated a culture where intellectual achievement was the highest form of honor. Among the most illustrious residents was Euclid, whose geometric treatises laid the groundwork for mathematics as a rigorous discipline. His elements would go on to influence the study of geometry for millennia. Eratosthenes, another luminary, calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, employing nothing more than shadows cast by the sun and a bit of inspired calculation, a feat that would not be rivaled for centuries. Hipparchus, the father of trigonometry, compiled star catalogues that would underpin celestial navigation. Yet it was not a sterile academy. The library and Mauseon were alive with debate and discovery, where philosophers wrestled with questions of ethics and metaphysics alongside empirical investigations into biology and physics. The polymath Archimedes, though more closely tied to Syracuse, shared in this golden age's spirit. His inventions, from compound pulleys to war machines, embodied the practical application of theoretical knowledge. Medical scholars dissected human bodies, challenging taboos to understand anatomy and physiology with a precision lost in later centuries. Their work prefigured the Renaissance's medical revolution, yet their texts perished in the flames or faded into oblivion. Literary giants crafted poetry and drama that resonated through time, while historians chronicled the ebb and flow of empires with a discerning eye, shaping the narrative of human civilization itself. The Great Library was more than an archive. It was a dynamic organism. Scrolls were constantly repaired, copied, and compared. Librarians like Zenodotus and Callimachus organized knowledge, creating cataloging systems, indexes, and bibliographies, methods that prefigure modern libraries. Callimachus, in particular, compiled the Pinax, an ambitious bibliographic work cataloging the entire collection, a testament to the desire for order amid intellectual abundance. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Alexandria was its ethos, that knowledge was universal, that it transcended borders and cultures. This was an era before nationalism, before rigid identities. Scholars shared ideas freely, corresponded across continents, and embraced the unknown with humility and wonder. The Mouseion functioned as an early model of global scholarship, reminding us that the search for wisdom is a collective human endeavor, not confined by time or geography. Yet, this luminous flame was vulnerable. As centuries passed, the political landscape shifted. The Ptolemaic dynasty waned. The Roman Empire rose to dominate the Mediterranean. Alexandria, once a beacon of enlightenment, became a city of contestation. Religious tensions simmered between pagans, Jews, and later Christians. Each wave of change carried with it the risk of destruction, not through a single cataclysmic act, but through neglect, suppression, and slow decay. The library's fate remains shrouded in mystery, a puzzle pieced together from fragmentary accounts. Some sources claim Julius Caesar's siege in 48 BC led to a devastating fire that engulfed parts of the city and the library's collections. Others point to decrees under later Roman emperors, or the fervor of religious purges, as contributors to its demise. Yet none tell the full story, for the obliteration was protracted, a death by 1,000 cuts. What is undeniable is that with each loss, humanity's collective memory fractured. Scrolls disappeared. Ideas once common knowledge were relegated to obscurity, and the thread connecting ancient brilliance to subsequent epochs was severed. Knowledge did not vanish entirely, but it was fragmented, distorted, and delayed. In its place rose a medieval world often content to look backwards rather than forwards, where superstition regained ground and scholar monks painstakingly preserved what little survived. The Renaissance, when it came, was an act of retrieval, a rediscovery of the wisdom buried beneath layers of time and oblivion. But the shadow of Alexandria loomed large, a reminder of how close humanity had come to a different path, a path where science, art, and philosophy flourished in tandem, where progress was less a climb and more a continuous unfolding. Today, when we gaze upon the ruins of this ancient city, when we marvel at the technologies and institutions we have built, we carry within us the echoes of Alexandria's lost legacy. The Great Library is more than a historical curiosity. It is a mirror reflecting our own vulnerabilities and aspirations. It warns us that knowledge is a treasure both precious and perilous, that it demands guardianship and reverence. In the silent halls of modern libraries, in the digital archives scattered across the globe, the spirit of Alexandria endures. The human quest for understanding is unbroken, a flame rekindled time and again against the encroaching dark. As we push the boundaries of what is known, mapping the genome, reaching out to distant planets, decoding the quantum fabric of reality, we stand on the shoulders of those ancient scholars who dared to dream of a universal mind. The Great Library of Alexandria remains, therefore, not just a monument to a past civilization, but a beacon for the future. It calls to us to remember that knowledge is fragile, that it can be lost if we are not vigilant, and that the true power of humanity lies in its relentless curiosity, the desire to know, to question, and to understand. This is the legacy of Alexandria, a testament to human potential, a cautionary tale, and an eternal invitation to reclaim the wisdom that once was, and to forge anew the path of enlightenment for generations yet unborn. Ptolemy Isoter laid the foundation. But it was his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who built the dream. Ptolemy II was a different kind of king. Unlike the warriors and conquerors who had come before him, he was frail, bookish, and consumed by an almost sacred passion for knowledge. His mind was a temple, and he sought to build a monument to human thought that would outlast the empires of men. He poured the bottomless wealth of Egypt into this grand project, channeling the riches of a vast and ancient land toward a single, transcendent purpose. To appreciate the magnitude of this vision, one must understand the context of the era. Egypt was a land steeped in millennia of history, from the mysterious hieroglyphs etched on temple walls to the wisdom of the Nile's flood cycles recorded by priests and scribes. It was a civilization that revered the past, yet Ptolemy too dared to look beyond its borders, beyond the familiar sands and temples, into the vastness of the known world. A world brimming with cultures as diverse as the Babylonian astronomers, the Indian mathematicians, and the Greek philosophers whose debates echoed from Athens to Rhodes. Ptolemy's ambition was nothing less than the creation of a universal repository, a sanctuary where the entirety of human knowledge could be gathered, preserved, and expanded. This was a project that transcended politics, transcended borders, and even transcended time itself. It was a testament to the belief that knowledge was a power greater than armies, a legacy stronger than monuments, and a light that could outlast even the fiercest storms of history. He dispatched agents across the known world, their coffers heavy with gold, their orders clear and uncompromising. But this was no typical trade mission. They were not sent to acquire spices that tantalized the tongue, nor slaves that fueled armies, nor gold that fed treasuries. Their mission was far rarer, far more profound: to buy scrolls, to gather the written wisdom of every culture, every civilization, every mind that had ever dared to leave its mark on papyrus. These agents were scholars in their own right, versed in languages and literatures unknown to many. They ventured into bustling marketplaces in Athens, quiet monastic scriptoria in Asia Minor, and the towering libraries of Babylon. They negotiated with scholars, priests, and scribes, convincing them to part with priceless scrolls, texts that contained the sacred chants of Egyptian priests, the epic poems of Homeric bards, the intricate treatises of Greek philosophers, and even the enigmatic cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia. Each scroll was a thread in the vast tapestry of human thought, a fragment of the collective human story that Ptolemy endeavored to weave into a unified whole. This was not merely a collection. It was a dragnet for the entire human mind. A royal decree thundered across the Mediterranean. Any ship, from any nation, that dared to dock in the magnificent harbor of Alexandria would be seized. Not the merchandise it carried, not the cargo to be sold or traded. No, it was the books, the scrolls, the manuscripts, the precious vessels of knowledge that were to be taken. This decree was a bold assertion of intellectual supremacy. The harbor of Alexandria, a marvel of engineering with its grand lighthouse standing sentinel against the sea, became not just a commercial hub but a gateway through which the wisdom of the world was funneled. The ships that sailed into the harbor, whether laden with olives from Greece, papyrus from Egypt, or silks from the East, were subject to this extraordinary mandate. The royal scribes, agents of the Ptolemaic kingdom, boarded these vessels bearing the insignia of the crown, their hands both gentle and firm. They were not thieves in the conventional sense but custodians of knowledge, wielding the authority to collect the written word as a treasure more precious than gold or silver. Every scroll, every map, every epic poem, every ledger recording the mundane or the divine, was confiscated, lifted from hands that had cherished them for generations. Imagine the scene: merchants and scholars watching helplessly as their prized possessions were removed, the ancient scrolls delicately rolled and sealed with wax, lifted into the vast halls of the library. For many, these scrolls were more than texts. They were inheritances, sacred links to ancestors, repositories of religious rites, scientific observations, or poetic genius. To see them taken was to feel a part of one's culture being uprooted. Yet, this was the price of the ambition to create a centralized fountain of knowledge, a beacon to which all seekers would come. They were carried to the library. There, within the vast halls of the Mauseon, an army of scribes worked tirelessly in the great scriptorium. By candlelight and dawn, they meticulously copied every single word, transcribing the wisdom of ages with painstaking care. The Mauseon itself was a marvel, a temple dedicated not to gods of war or fertility, but to the Muses, the divine patrons of the arts and sciences. Its architecture was designed to inspire contemplation and reverence. Marble columns soared to the vaulted ceilings. Frescoes depicted the muses in scenes of study and inspiration, and every corner echoed with the faint scratch of quills and the whispered discussions of scholars. The great scriptorium was the heart of this institution, a sanctum where knowledge was not simply stored but reproduced, preserved against the ravages of time. Scribes, trained in the nuances of language and script, labored through the nights. They copied scroll after scroll, ensuring that the content was exact, preserving nuances of grammar and meaning. This was not mechanical duplication but an act of devotion, a ritual of intellectual preservation. The scriptorium was a hive of ceaseless activity, where the act of writing became an offering to posterity, and then the copies were returned to their original owners. But the Great Library kept the originals. This was an act of breathtaking arrogance. Cultural piracy writ large, a statement etched in ink and power: your knowledge now belongs to us. Your thoughts now live in Alexandria. The implications of this policy were profound and unsettling. It marked Alexandria as the unquestioned intellectual capital of the ancient world, a city that claimed the collective wisdom of humanity. It was a bold, almost imperialistic assertion, a cultural conquest without armies or bloodshed. The idea that knowledge could be seized, centralized, and controlled was revolutionary. It set a precedent for the way information would be treated for millennia to come, raising questions about ownership, access, and the ethics of intellectual property long before these terms existed. The most famous story of this intellectual expropriation was the tale of the Athenian loan. Ptolemy III, known as Euergetes, or the benefactor, sought the official, state-sanctioned texts of the three great Athenian tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. These were not mere books. They were cultural treasures, jealously guarded by the city of Athens, the cradle of Western drama and philosophy. Athens was a city fiercely protective of its heritage. The works of its tragedians were not just literature. They were pillars of civic identity, embodiments of the city's intellectual soul. To ask for these scrolls was to reach into the heart of Athenian culture. Ptolemy's request was diplomatic, cloaked in respect and humility, a formal appeal to borrow the scrolls for the purpose of copying and preserving. Ptolemy sent an embassy with a humble request to borrow these scrolls, merely to make copies. The Athenians, wary and proud, demanded a deposit. A colossal, unthinkable sum of silver, 15 talents, a king's ransom, the equivalent of tens of millions of modern dollars. This was to guarantee the safe return of their precious scrolls. This demand was both a test and a statement. The Athenians made it clear that these scrolls were priceless, that their loss would be an irreparable wound. The deposit was a form of insurance, a contract that underscored the scroll's sacred value. It was an assertion of cultural sovereignty, a line drawn in the sands of history. Ptolemy agreed. He paid the deposit. The precious, original scrolls were sent to Alexandria. The scribes went to work, their quills dancing across papyrus, replicating the genius of the tragedian. And then Ptolemy sent a message back to Athens. He said, keeping the originals. Athens could keep the deposit. The audacity of this move was staggering. It was a calculated act of cultural appropriation, cloaked in the guise of diplomacy. Athens was left with nothing but copies, while the originals became sacred relics of Alexandria's intellectual dominance. The Athenians were furious. But what could they do? Rebel against the might of Egypt's navy over a pile of papyrus? This was the ambition of the library. Not just to possess knowledge, but to own it outright. To hoard it like a dragon guarding its hoard. To centralize the wisdom of the world under one roof. And so the scrolls poured in, like rivers swelling after a storm. 40,000. 100,000. The numbers we have are fantastical, almost beyond belief. 400,000 scrolls in the main library, known as the Bruchen, another 40,000 in its daughter library at the Temple of Serapis. Some sources claim the total collection reached 700,000 scrolls. This incredible accumulation was more than just a mass of texts. It was an intellectual universe contained within fragile papyrus. Each scroll was a vessel, fragile and perishable, yet brimming with the distilled thoughts of poets, scientists, historians, and prophets. The sheer volume of scrolls was staggering. The weight of accumulated human knowledge pressed against the walls of the library, a testament to the insatiable curiosity of an age. Each scroll might contain an epic like the Iliad in its entirety, or a single play, or a collection of scientific observations, or the sacred hymns of a long-lost religion. What this meant was staggering. Everything that had ever been written, in Greek, in Egyptian, in Babylonian, in Hebrew, was here. The library was the heart of a vast intellectual empire. The Ptolemies even commissioned the first great translation in history, the Septuagint, the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek, crafted for the large Jewish population of the city. This was not just a linguistic feat. It was a cultural bridge, a testament to Alexandria's role as a melting pot of civilizations. The Septuagint was more than a translation. It was a dialogue between cultures, a weaving of disparate threads into a new tapestry of understanding. It allowed Hebrew scripture to be accessible to Greek speakers, bridging linguistic and cultural divides, and sowing seeds for philosophical and theological discourse that would resonate through the ages. But this immense accumulation of knowledge created a problem, an ancient problem that resonates even in our digital age. When you have all the information in the world, how do you find anything? How does one navigate this ocean of scrolls, this sea of human thought? This challenge fell to a poet and scholar named Callimachus. His solution would change the world far more than any king or general. He created the Pinax. The Pinax, or tables, was nothing less than the first library catalog in human history. It was the invention of information science. Callimachus did not simply list the scrolls haphazardly. He organized them with the precision of a master craftsman. He created subject headings: rhetoric, law, epic, tragedy, comedy, history, medicine, mathematics, natural science. Within each category, he listed authors alphabetically, allowing scholars to locate texts with ease. But he went further still. He wrote a short biography of each author, breathing life into the dead names on papyrus. He listed their works, detailed the first line of each to distinguish authentic texts from fakes, and even noted the total number of lines in the scroll, a safeguard against forgery and error. This was the birth of metadata, the birth of bibliography, the world's first search engine, centuries before the word would be coined. Callimachus was not just a librarian. He was the first information scientist, a pioneer who tamed the chaos of knowledge and brought order where there was none. The Pinax transformed the library from a chaotic warehouse into a living, breathing organism. Scholars could now navigate the labyrinthine collection with guided precision. The catalog did more than organize. It told stories about the authors, their lives, and their intellectual legacies. It preserved context, authenticity, and lineage. With this tool in hand, the Mauseon, the Temple of the Muses, ignited. It became a beacon, drawing the greatest minds of the age like moths to a divine flame. Scholars, poets, scientists, philosophers, all gathered beneath its vaulted ceilings. They debated, they wrote, they discovered. And what they did there, what they uncovered, is the heart of the tragedy. This is the secret knowledge that we lost. The head librarian was a man named Eratosthenes, known as Beta, the second letter of the Greek alphabet, because he was considered the second best in the world at everything: mathematics, geography, astronomy, poetry, philosophy. His intellect spanned the breadth of human knowledge. Eratosthenes embodied the spirit of the Mauseon. He was a polymath whose curiosity was insatiable, whose intellect bred disciplines effortlessly. At a time when specialization was rare, he was a man who could wield the tools of geometry as deftly as the muses of poetry. One day, Eratosthenes read a simple travelogue in the library. It mentioned that on a specific day, the summer solstice, in the city of Syene, far to the south, the noonday sun shone directly down a deep well. It cast no shadow. This observation was seemingly minor, a footnote in a travel diary, but to Eratosthenes, it was a revelation. Eratosthenes was a geographer. He knew that in Alexandria, on the very same day, at the very same time, a vertical stick did cast a shadow, and in that shadow, he saw the curve of the earth. He hypothesized that the difference in the shadow's angle was due to the planet's curvature. To test this, he hired a man to walk the distance from Alexandria to Syene, to get a precise measurement. The journey was arduous, a trek over deserts and hills, through villages and rivers, yet essential. The result was a precise measure, approximately 5,000 stadia. He did the math. The angle of the shadow in Alexandria was 7.2 degrees, or 1/50th of a 360-degree circle. The distance was 5,000 stadia. Multiply that by 50, and you get 250,000 stadia. He had calculated the circumference of the Earth. His calculation, translated into modern units, was off by less than 2%. This was in 240 BC. While the Romans were still fighting for control of Italy, a man in Alexandria had, with a stick, a well, and a library, measured the world. But he was not alone. A generation before him, an astronomer named Aristarchus of Samos studied at the Mausion. He watched the shadow of the Earth cross the moon during a lunar eclipse. He observed the phases of the moon, the waxing and waning that spoke of celestial mechanics, and he proposed something so radical, so heretical, that it was buried for nearly 2 millennia. He proposed that the Earth was not the center of the universe. He proposed that the Earth, and all the other planets, revolved around the sun. Heliocentrism. In 300 BC, he was ridiculed. The idea was too vast, too terrifying in its implications. It was counterintuitive. It was blasphemous. The knowledge was recorded, and then it was ignored. It was filed away in the library's vaults. When the library died, this idea died with it. It would not be resurrected until Nicolaus Copernicus, 1,800 years later, plucked Aristarchus's name from a single, surviving fragment of text. We had the answer to the solar system, and we let it slip through our fingers. The Great Library was more than a building. It was a forge for ideas, a crucible where the raw ore of human thought was smelted into pure understanding. It was the birthplace of disciplines that would define civilization: geography, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, literary criticism. It was home to Euclid, the father of geometry; to Herophilos, the pioneer of anatomy; to Hipparchus, the founder of trigonometry. Euclid's work laid the foundations for the systematic study of space and form, his elements shaping the way we understand geometry even today. Herophilos, through careful dissection, peeled back the mysteries of the human body, advancing medicine beyond superstition into the realm of observation and knowledge. Hipparchus mapped the heavens with startling accuracy, his trigonometric methods enabling navigation and understanding of celestial movements. Within its walls, scholars debated the nature of the cosmos, the origins of life, the principles of logic. The Mausion was a sanctuary, a place where the mind could roam free, unshackled by superstition or dogma. Philosophers argued over the essence of reality, poets crafted verses that captured the human soul, and scientists measured and classified the natural world. The air was thick with the electric charge of discovery and the quiet insistence of contemplation. Here, ideas were forged, tested, and refined, a place where curiosity was the highest virtue and knowledge the noblest pursuit. And yet, for all its grandeur, for all its brilliance, the Great Library was fragile. It was a flame flickering against the winds of time, politics, and war. Its destruction is a story shrouded in mystery and tragedy, a slow unraveling rather than a single cataclysm. Fires, neglect, civil unrest, and the shifting tides of power all played their part. Ancient accounts speak of fires set during Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria, of decrees that left the building vulnerable, of centuries-long decline as patronage waned and political will shifted. The scrolls, vulnerable to fire, moisture, and decay, disappeared one after another. With each lost scroll, a fragment of human heritage vanished. What was lost in those ashes was not just scrolls and manuscripts, but the cumulative wisdom of centuries, the distilled essence of human curiosity and genius. The legacy of the Great Library of Alexandria is a haunting reminder that knowledge, once lost, is not easily reclaimed. That the pursuit of understanding requires not only the gathering of information but the preservation of its spirit. In its brief, shining epoch, Alexandria illuminated the world. It showed us what is possible when knowledge is treasured above all else, a beacon, a promise, and a warning. The library was not just for theorists. It was for engineers, those tireless minds who looked beyond the stars and the scrolls and sought to bend the laws of nature itself. to harness the unseen forces that whispered through the world. Among them was a man named Ctesibius, a figure now dimmed by the passage of millennia, yet once a brilliant beacon of innovation and experiment. Known to history as the father of pneumatics, Ctesibius was a master of air and water, of pressure and flow, who transformed simple elements into the instruments of wonder and utility. In the shadowed halls of Alexandria, where the scent of papyrus mingled with the smoke of oil lamps, Ctesibius labored. His mind spun with the mechanics of life itself, how to move, to measure, to create. Amidst the labyrinthine stacks of scrolls, and beside the murmurs of scholars debating philosophy and mathematics, his workshop was a sanctuary of noise and motion. Tubes hissed, bronze valves clicked, and water pooled in polished basins as he coaxed the invisible forces of nature into submission. His inventions were not merely tricks or stagecraft. They were the first glimpses of applied science, of turning theory into tangible reality. Among his many inventions was the hydraulis, the water organ, an instrument that sang with the breath of water and air, captivating audiences with its ethereal melodies. Imagine the scene. An amphitheater filled with expectant spectators as the hydraulis began to play. No strings, no reeds moved by human breath alone, but the steady, measured pressure of water driving pipes to sing. The music was not simply sound. It was the very embodiment of harmony between natural force and human ingenuity. This was no mere toy but a triumph of engineering, a device that transformed water pressure into music, blending art and science in a seamless dance. It foreshadowed the mechanization of sound itself, centuries before the advent of pianos or organs as we know them. But Ctesibius's genius did not stop at music. He devised the hydraulic clock, a marvel of temporal precision, an early attempt to tame time itself, measuring the relentless flow of hours with water's steady hand. Picture the slow, rhythmic drip of water filling carefully calibrated vessels, the rising levels moving floats and gears, marking the passing moments with a silent, mechanical grace. Before the mechanical clocks of the Middle Ages, this was humanity's attempt to grasp the intangible river of time, to impose order on chaos, to create a rhythm for life and work. It was a precursor to the grand clocks that would ring out across Europe millennia later. But here, in the dusty workshops of Alexandria, it was born. And perhaps most enduringly, he crafted a water pump, a force pump, whose design was so elegant and effective that its principles endure even today, powering the mechanisms of modern fire extinguishers, devices that save countless lives by controlling one of humanity's most feared elements, fire. This pump was no crude machine. It was a symphony of levers, valves, and pistons, a practical tool born from a deep understanding of fluid dynamics. With each stroke, it could move water against gravity, bringing life-giving and life-saving liquid to where it was needed. In a world where fires devastated wooden cities and thatched roofs, such an invention was a beacon of hope. Here was the seed of hydraulic engineering, a field that would blossom into the complex waterworks and urban planning of later civilizations. From the seeds planted by Ctesibius grew a tree of invention that would shade the ages. His student, or perhaps the student of his student, was a man named Hero of Alexandria, a figure whose name resonates with the spirit of ingenuity and playful curiosity. Hero was a tinkerer in the truest sense, a man who saw the world as a vast workshop, where the laws of nature were puzzles to be solved and toys to be made. In the bustling city where commerce and culture intersected, Hero's mind roamed freely, inspired by both the splendor of the natural world and the boundless possibilities of mechanics. Hero's creations were not confined to the dusty scrolls of theory. They were mechanical marvels, animated by the mysterious forces of steam and air. He invented the world's first vending machine, a device so simple yet profound. Insert a coin, and a measured splash of holy water would pour forth, mechanizing the sacred in a new, democratized way. This was no mere novelty. It was an early demonstration of automation and control, the idea that machines could perform tasks independently, relieving human effort and standardizing processes. In temples, where ritual purity was paramount, the vending machine transformed religious practice by regulating access to holy water, making the divine more accessible yet more controlled. He engineered automatic temple doors, powered by steam and gravity, which opened as if by divine command, enchanting worshippers and showcasing the marriage of faith and technology. Imagine entering a darkened sanctuary, only to see massive bronze doors silently parting, moved not by priests but by ingeniously channeled steam. To the faithful, this was a miracle. To engineers, a triumph of physics. These doors were not just mechanical wonders but symbols of the power that knowledge could wield over the natural world, and over human perception itself. They blurred the line between the sacred and the scientific, between faith and reason. His wind-powered organ filled the air with music, harnessing the breath of the wind itself to animate pipes and reeds, a symphony of technology and nature. In an age before electricity or complex machinery, Hero's organ harnessed natural forces, converting breeze into melody. The sound would rise and fall with the wind, a living instrument that sang with the breath of the earth. It was a poetic dance between man and nature, technology and environment, sound and silence. But perhaps his most famous and mystifying creation was a small, toy-like device known as the aeolipile. The aeolipile was a hollow sphere, balanced delicately on an axle, with two bent nozzles protruding like the arms of a celestial dancer. Fill it with water, light a fire beneath it, and the water transformed into steam, a powerful, invisible force that shot from the nozzles, causing the sphere to spin rapidly, wildly, as if alive. This was no mere curiosity. It was the world's first functioning rotational steam engine, a device that embodied the raw power of steam. Centuries before the Industrial Revolution would harness it to reshape the planet. The sphere would revolve in a hypnotic whirl, propelled by the force of steam jetting outward, a tangible demonstration of action and reaction, of energy transformed and unleashed. Yet to the minds of Hero's world, it was a toy, a marvel to be admired but not to be taken seriously. No one, neither Hero, nor the Romans who witnessed the device, connected this spinning sphere to the potential for machinery, for industry, for the transformation of labor itself. The aeolipile was a spark without tinder, a blueprint for a revolution that sat idle on a dusty shelf, waiting for the minds to ignite it. It was as if the future had been glimpsed through a veil, but then the vision was forgotten, lost in the endless cycles of war, conquest, and the slow decay of civilizations. And then, there was medicine, an arena where the Great Library's impact was nothing short of revolutionary. Two men, Herodotus and Erasistratus, stand as titans in the annals of anatomical science. Before their time, the human body was a sealed mystery, a sacred vessel not to be disturbed. Religious and cultural taboos forbade the cutting open of human flesh, shrouding the secrets of life and death in a veil of ignorance. But the Ptolemies, rulers who styled themselves as pharaohs, gods on earth, held sway over these taboos. Empowered by divine authority, they granted Herodotus and Erasistratus permission to dissect human bodies, a permission unprecedented in human history. These men did not merely dissect. They vivisected, cutting into condemned criminals still alive, unlocking the living body's secrets in real time. Such acts, inconceivable in many cultures, were a testament to the Ptolemies' unique blend of power, patronage, and scientific daring. It was a gamble on knowledge, a rebellion against superstition, and a quest to illuminate the corporeal temple of life. What they discovered was nothing short of extraordinary. They mapped the intricate architecture of the human body with precision and clarity that would not be matched for 2 millennia. They identified the brain, not the heart, as the seat of sensation and intelligence, a revelation that challenged centuries of erroneous belief. In doing so, they upended the ancient wisdom of Aristotle and others, who had long held the heart as the center of thought and emotion. They distinguished motor nerves, which command muscle movement, from sensory nerves, which convey feeling, revealing the complex communication network that animates the living body. They elucidated the workings of the heart's valves, the liver's functions, the pancreas's role in digestion, and the optic nerve's connection to sight. Their observations were detailed and systematic, a proto-science of anatomy that laid the groundwork for medicine as a discipline rooted in empirical evidence rather than myth. They developed early theories of physiology that, while imperfect, moved humanity closer to understanding the machinery of life. This was science born from boldness and curiosity, illuminating the human form with unprecedented clarity. But this knowledge, too, was fragile. It was written down, stored in the vast archives of the library, yet soon lost to the tides of history. After Herodotus and Erasistratus, the taboo on dissection returned with relentless force. For 1,500 years, European medicine languished under the shadow of flawed, Animal-based theories promulgated by Galen. Physicians bled patients according to astrological charts, blind to the true map of the human body that lay forgotten, crumbling to dust in the silent vaults of Alexandria. The promise of anatomical science was deferred, its light dimmed by superstition and dogma. This was the knowledge housed within the library's towering walls, not merely poems and stories, but the seeds of a future that might have been, a future of steam power that could have transformed economies and warfare, of anatomical science that could have saved millions, of astronomy that could have realigned humanity's place in the cosmos. A future that should have happened. So what happened to it? Who destroyed the single greatest treasure in human history? The popular story is a simple one: a great fire, a single, tragic event that consumed the library in one cataclysmic blaze. But the truth is far darker, far more complex, and infinitely more tragic. The library was not murdered in a single night. It was a slow, brutal, agonizing death, by 1,000 cuts. It was not one culprit but a conspiracy of culprits, a parade of human folly, stretching over 7 centuries, each wound a testament to the fragility of knowledge in the face of power, ignorance, and zealotry. The first, and most famous, suspect, Julius Caesar. The year is 48 BC. Julius Caesar, the towering figure of Roman ambition and military genius, finds himself in Alexandria. He has pursued his rival, Pompey, across the Mediterranean, only to discover Pompey assassinated upon his arrival in Egypt. Now, Caesar is entangled in a civil war, a tangled web of palace intrigue and sibling rivalry between the young King Ptolemy XIII and his sister, wife, and rival, Cleopatra VII. Caesar, with a mere 4,000 legionaries, is besieged within the royal palace complex known as the Bruchon. Meanwhile, the Egyptian army, loyal to Ptolemy, controls the city and, crucially, the harbor. In a desperate and brilliant tactical maneuver, Caesar orders his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet docked at the harbor. Torches are carried, ships are ignited, and flames leap up against the night sky. The harbor becomes a blazing inferno, a chaotic conflagration reflecting the chaos of war itself. The flames leap high, casting flickering shadows on stone walls and the faces of soldiers and citizens alike, creating a night of terror and destruction. But the fire, once unleashed, spreads beyond control. The Roman historian Plutarch, writing more than a century later, tells us that the fire leaped from the dockyards and destroyed the Great Library. This has become the enduring image, the conflagration of knowledge, the single moment when the Great Library was lost forever. Case closed. But is it true? Look closer. The Great Library, the Mausoleum, was located in the royal palace quarter where Caesar himself was besieged. It was not on the docks. What stood on the docks were houses, massive storage facilities filled with grain to feed the city and warehouses filled with scrolls, perhaps 40,000 of them, packed in crates and destined for export to Rome. What Caesar burned, most modern historians now believe, was not the Great Library itself but a storage depot. A tragic loss, certainly, but not the final death of the Mausoleum. The Great Library survived Julius Caesar. It endured, still standing, still a beacon of knowledge. Cleopatra, later allied with Mark Antony, is said to have replenished its collections, adding 200,000 scrolls sourced from the Library of Pergamum, the great rival Alexandria had long competed with. No, Caesar's fire was but the first cut. The library was wounded, but its heart continued to beat. The real death, the forgotten death, came centuries later. This is the second culprit, the Emperor Aurelian. The year is 272 AD. The Roman Empire is embroiled in chaos, known as the crisis of the 3rd century. Empires rise and fall, generals seize power, and the very fabric of Rome's dominion frays. A new power has emerged in the east, the Pomeranian Empire, ruled by the formidable warrior Queen Zenobia. In a stunning blitzkrieg of conquest, Zenobia seizes Egypt, taking Alexandria into her grasp. But the Roman Emperor Aurelian, a hardened soldier known for his ruthlessness, marches to reclaim the city. The battle for Alexandria is no distant siege. It is a brutal, merciless street-to-street, house-to-house slaughter. Zenobia's forces retreat into the wealthiest, most fortified district, the Bruchon. The royal quarter, the very place where the Great Library once stood in all its glory. Aurelian, a man without patience for philosophers or scholars, lays waste to the entire district. He annihilated it, as the historian Ammianus Marcellinus would write a century later, describing the Bruchon as a place of which, in our own time, not a trace remains. This moment was the death knell for the Great Library. The Mauseon, the research institute where Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference and Aristarchus proposed a sun-centered cosmos, was wiped from the face of the earth. It was not the pyre of religious zealots that consumed it. It was not an accidental blaze. It was pulverized, erased as collateral damage in a forgotten war for power, a war where knowledge was a casualty, not a prize. But even then, the story does not end. Though the library was dead, its daughter lived on. Elsewhere in Alexandria, perched on a hill overlooking the sea, stood the magnificent temple of the god Serapis, the Serapeum. This temple was more than a house of worship. It was a public library, a sanctuary of scrolls, housing perhaps 40,000 volumes. It was the best of collection, the last great repository of ancient wisdom, and it too had a fateful encounter with history. This is the third and most infamous culprit, the Patriarch Theophilus. The year is 391 AD. The Roman Empire has transformed. Christianity has emerged as the dominant, state-sponsored faith, triumphant and intolerant. The Emperor Theodosius issues an edict: all pagan temples must be closed, all pagan worship erased. Alexandria is a city on the edge, a tinderbox of religious violence. Pagans, Jews, and Christians clash in the streets. The city's bishop and patriarch, Theophilus, is no mere man of God. He is a political operator, a Christian pharaoh, wielding faith as a weapon to consolidate his grip on power. Theophilus sets his sights on the Serapeum, the last grand symbol of pagan defiance. He leads a mob of monks and zealots, the so-called Desert Fathers, to the temple on the hill. They storm the sanctuary. The pagans, led by the philosopher Olympius, resist fiercely. The struggle spills blood in the temple's sacred precincts, but the Christians, backed by imperial soldiers, overwhelm the defenders. Theophilus's forces ransack the Serapeum, destroying statues, burning sacred texts, and scattering scrolls to the winds. The temple's storied columns, once echoing with chants and prayers to the god Serapis, now reverberate with the cries of battle and the crackle of flames. In this sacrilege, the last flickering flame of the Great Library's legacy is snuffed out. Thus, the final act in the long tragedy unfolds, not with fanfare, nor in a single blaze of glory, but in a gradual, ruthless erasure of knowledge, culture, and belief. The Great Library was not destroyed by a single hand, nor destroyed in a single night. It was sacrificed on the altar of human ambition, fear, and misunderstanding. Its ashes scattered in the winds of time, its scrolls lost beneath the rubble of empire, and its wisdom swallowed by the silence of oblivion. Yet, in the echoes of its halls, in the faint glow of its innovations, the spirit of Alexandria lives on, a testament to the fragile, precious flame of knowledge that humanity must forever strive to protect. What follows is an orgy of destruction, a tempest of violence that tears through the heart of Alexandria, a city once resplendent with the glow of knowledge and the hum of intellectual pursuit. The cult statue of Serapis, that magnificent idol carved from ivory and gold, stands as a proud symbol of the city's syncretic spirit, a deity embodying the fusion of Egyptian and Hellenistic faiths. But now, under the hands of zealots driven by fervent ideology, this sacred emblem is shattered mercilessly. Ivory cracks, gold flakes away, each fragment a sacrilege, a relic of an irredeemed impure and corrupt. These broken pieces do not merely fall to the ground. They are dragged through the city streets, a ghastly parade of triumph and humiliation, paraded before crowds whose voices scream with obscene glee or despairing horror. The shattering of Serapis is not just the destruction of a statue, but the symbolic annihilation of a cultural identity, a deliberate attempt to erase the memory of a pluralistic past. Then, the scrolls, the precious scrolls that held centuries upon centuries of accumulated wisdom, are seized. These scrolls, fragile rolls of papyrus inked with the thoughts of philosophers, mathematicians, poets, and historians, were the lifeblood of the Great Library. They were the silent custodians of knowledge passed down through the ages, bridging civilizations from the Babylonians to the Greeks, from Egypt to Persia. Each scroll was a testament to human curiosity and intellectual rigor, carefully collected and preserved in the Mauseon, the great temple of learning that was at once a sanctuary and a beacon. But now, in the grip of fanaticism, these fragile vessels of enlightenment are wrenched from their sanctuaries, ripped from their shelves, and gathered in heaps that will soon be engulfed by flames. This was no accident. It was no unintended casualty of war, no collateral damage in the chaotic tides of conquest. This was a deliberate, calculated book burning, a ritualistic purge that sought to annihilate entire bodies of knowledge. To Theophilus and his followers, these scrolls were not repositories of truth or vital intellectual heritage. They were heresy incarnate. They represented the lies of the pagans, the secret knowledge of a dead, demonic world that must be purged for the salvation of souls and the purity of faith. The scrolls were seen as dangerous relics of an impure past, a threat to the monotheistic order that sought to impose a new, singular narrative upon the ancient city, and so they were set alight. Flames licked hungrily at the dry papyrus, curling edges turning to ash and smoke, consuming the last great collection of ancient wisdom. The fire was both physical and symbolic, the final, righteous destruction of the old world's knowledge. The last echo of the Great Library was not lost to accidental fire, but was deliberately, zealously destroyed. As the flames rose and crackled, they seemed to devour not just the scrolls themselves, but the very spirit of inquiry and open-mindedness that had defined Alexandria for centuries. This is the event that echoes through history, the fire of fanaticism, the day knowledge was declared an enemy. It was the moment when prejudice and fear triumphed over reason and curiosity. The line of history was broken. The great mind of Alexandria, which had illuminated the ancient world with the light of reason, was silenced under the weight of ignorance and intolerance. But there is one more story. One more culprit. An echo, a ghost in the scrolls of time, haunting the annals of history 6 centuries later. The year is 642 AD. A new power sweeps across the known world, like a tidal wave reshaping the cultural and political landscape. The armies of Islam, united under the banner of a burgeoning caliphate. The general Amr ibn al-As, a man of considerable military skill and political acumen, leads the conquest of Egypt for the Caliph Omar. He enters Alexandria, a city once radiant with knowledge but now a shadow of its former self. Its glory faded like a dying ember in the vast darkness of history. A legend, penned 6 centuries after the event by a Christian writer named Bar-Hebbus, tells this story with a mix of awe and condemnation. Amr, a learned man and a commander not unfamiliar with knowledge, is struck by the ruins of the libraries. He sees the scattered relics of a grand intellectual tradition and wonders what fate should befall these books, these scrolls of ancient wisdom. He asks the caliph what to do with the precious manuscripts. The caliph, sitting in his tent far away in Mecca, replies with chilling, clinical logic, "If those books are in agreement with the Quran, we have no need of them. And if these are opposed to the Quran, destroy them." This decree embodies the ultimate logic of fanaticism, a binary verdict that offers no room for nuance, no shelter for dissenting ideas, no mercy for the complexity inherent in human knowledge. It is a ruthless filter that either sanctifies or obliterates, leaving behind a stark, unforgiving landscape where ideas either conform or perish. And so, the story goes, the scrolls of the Library of Alexandria were gathered and used as fuel for the city's 4,000 bathhouses, their accumulated wisdom literally burned to heat baths. The image is horrifying in its banality, a grand collection of human thought reduced to kindling, to mere firewood, their priceless contents sacrificed to the mundane tasks of everyday life. The legend claims it took 6 months to burn them all, a slow, agonizing cremation of knowledge. But is it true? Almost certainly not. This story was propaganda, a bitter narrative crafted centuries later by Christian writers to demonize the Muslim invaders, painting them as barbaric destroyers of culture. By 642 AD, what library was left to burn? The truth is that the Great Library had long since been decimated, its vast warehouses destroyed by Julius Caesar's accidental fire during his siege of Alexandria. Later emperors like Aurelian pulverized the royal district, and Theophilus's zealotry torched the Serapeum, the grand temple that housed much of the library's collection. Centuries of neglect, conflict, and decay had reduced the once mighty repository of knowledge to ruins, a shadowy memory of its former self. The Arab army did not find a library. They found a graveyard. The tale of the bathhouse bonfire is just one more handful of dirt thrown on a grave already centuries old. A myth that attempts to simplify a complex history into a single villain, a single moment of catastrophe. This is the real tragedy. There is no single villain, no lone arsonist of knowledge. The Great Library was a victim of slow, human failure. It was wounded by Caesar's ambition, his flames igniting the first spark of destruction, a tragic byproduct of imperial warfare. It was murdered by Aurelian's indifference, the imperial soldier whose concern lay in power and conquest, not in the preservation of scrolls. It was desecrated by Theophilus's fanaticism, the zealous patriarch who saw knowledge as a threat to orthodoxy and sought to stamp out pagan wisdom. And its grave was trampled upon by later propagandists, each adding their own layer of myth, blame, and distortion to the story. It died as it was born, as a symbol. It was born as a symbol of knowledge as power, a beacon of the human mind's boundless capacity to understand and master the world. The Mauseon was not merely a library or a collection of scrolls. It was an institution dedicated to the pursuit of learning for its own sake, a secular, state-funded research institute that predated modern universities by centuries, a place where scholars from across the Mediterranean gathered to debate, discover, and disseminate ideas. It died as a symbol of knowledge as a threat to authority, to dogma, to fear. The destruction of the Great Library represents the crushing of intellectual freedom under the weight of intolerance and the politics of power, and the loss is incalculable. It is not merely the 90 lost plays of Sophocles, the 100 lost epics of the Trojan cycle, or the histories of Babylon and Egypt swallowed by time. These are but fragments of a broader tapestry, threads torn from the fabric of human understanding. It is the mindset, the Mauseon itself, the very idea of a collaborative, open-minded, secular institution dedicated to critical, scientific research and inquiry. When that idea died, the world entered 1,000 years of darkness. Did the library's fall cause the Dark Ages? No. The calamity was born of the fall of Rome, the disintegration of an empire that had been the political and cultural backbone of Europe and the Mediterranean. But did the loss of this knowledge make the Dark Ages darker? Did it lengthen the climb back into light? Absolutely. We are left with the eternal what-ifs, phantom limbs of our history, haunting our collective imagination. What if Hero's steam engine, a device capable of converting steam into mechanical motion, had been coupled with Roman engineering brilliance? Would we have witnessed an industrial revolution in 300 AD, steam-powered galleys slicing through the Mediterranean, factories humming in Rome, a world that skipped a millennium of back-breaking manual labor and technological stagnation? What if Aristarchus's heliocentrism, the revolutionary idea that the Earth orbits the Sun, had been accepted, embraced by the scholars of Alexandria? Would we have avoided 1,800 years of geocentric dogma, the erroneous belief that Earth was the center of the universe? Would the Church have ever found itself at war with science? Might Galileo have lived free of the Inquisition's grim gaze, his genius unshackled by dogmatic fear? What if the anatomical knowledge of Herodotus, who pioneered human dissection and advanced the understanding of the nervous system, had survived the dark centuries? Would medicine have leapt forward by 1,500 years? Would we have been spared centuries of plague, of bleeding, of superstition masquerading as healing? We will never know. In 2002, a new library rose in Egypt, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. This stunning, modern edifice, shaped like a rising sun, is perched on the same shore where the original once stood, gazing out over the Mediterranean's endless blue. It is a beautiful gesture, a monument to memory and hope. A promise. But it is a digital library, a library of our age. The original is gone. The scrolls are ash. The knowledge is lost. The Great Library of Alexandria was not just a building. It was a process. It was the belief that knowledge is worth gathering, worth protecting, and worth pursuing for its own sake. It was the embodiment of the human spirit's relentless quest to illuminate the darkness of ignorance, and the fight to protect that idea, against fire, against war, against indifference, and against the chilling, righteous certainty of fanatics. That fight never, ever ends.